Hey, Do-It-Yourself Junkie 369 here today, and I'm going to be showing you how to create traditional real barbecue on just a Weber grill. Preparation for your fire actually begins the night before, or as early as possible, depending on what type of wood you're using. For pork and beef, I like to use hickory. There's other woods that are available depending on the type of meat that you're smoking, and those are shown here on a list. Popular items to be smoked and what wood gives it the best flavor. You just basically look at what you're cooking and choose what you've either experienced in the past or you think would add good flavor to whatever meal that you're preparing. In this case, I'm doing a pork butt, so I'm using hickory. I either use chips, as shown in this bag, or chunks. I like the chunks better because they last longer in the fire and provide a greater smoke taste to the meat, but chips works pretty well. It provides a lot of smoke all at one time, and if you're using chunks, you can skip this step, but with chips, you definitely need to soak them in water overnight to keep them from burning off too quickly. Basically, you just take your chips, dump however many you think you'll need into a bowl. In this case, I don't have very much left, so I'm using all of it. And then add water to the bowl and let it soak overnight. All you want to do is make sure there's enough water to fully submerge the chips. They will float, but it won't matter as long as some surface of the wood chip is touching water. It will absorb the water due to the nature of wood. The Weber I'm using is a 22-inch model. Any charcoal grill will do as long as it has enough space to create a fire off to one side and hold all the meat on the other side. The first step you'll need to do is to make sure your grill's clean. If you don't start with a clean grill, it'll affect the taste of your meat. Here you can see chunks of whatever's left over from the last time I barbecued something, and then also all the ash left in the grill. You'll want to make sure to clean this stuff off because there will be some airflow through your grill, especially when you take the lid off, and that ash can blow up and get on the meat and ruin the taste of it. Okay, now that the ash is all cleaned out of the grill and most of the black material from the previous smoking procedure is out, I want to show you how you're going to control the temperature to get that perfect barbecue setup for slow smoking meat. Here you can see the holes in the bottom of the grill, and after you have your fire started, you're going to close this off almost completely. It looks about like that. And your grill setup and where you're at and what the outside temperature is at will vary how small you want to close this hole off. You still need to get enough airflow through there to maintain a certain temperature. On the lid of the grill, you're basically going to do the same thing. You're going to rotate this closed till it's in about that position. This is after you get the fire going. I wanted to show it to you now because once I build the fire, the coals are going to block off the bottom half of the grill and you won't be able to see the adjustments that I've made. Now you'll notice that the black material coating the grate, I really didn't scrape it off because this particular barbecue I'm doing is going to be placed in a pan and won't be in contact with the grate. And then also I didn't scrape the entire interior of the grill clean other than to remove all the ash. And the reason for that is this black material most people consider a seasoning for their smoker, and to remove it all would kind of remove some of the taste that you get. You just want to make sure that anything loose is removed so it doesn't fall onto the meat while it's cooking. The fire that I like to use when I barbecue is designed to burn for 8 to 10 hours without tending. And to set it up, I use a charcoal starter chimney like this one, and I fill it up with unlit coals. It doesn't matter what kind of charcoal you use, as long as it's one you're comfortable with using, and preferably not one that contains lighter fluid. Lighter fluid can ruin the taste. Once you have those coals poured and measured out, they go in the grill. Now this method only works if you have a grill big enough to hold this much charcoal. It's difficult to see through the grate, but you want all the charcoal piled on one side. Basically, the pile of charcoal is going to stop before it gets to the center of the grill. This is a one zone fire. Basically, all the heat is being produced over here, and then your meat goes on the side without the fire to cook indirectly, sort of how an oven cooks food. Once you get your first portion of charcoal measured out, you want about 15 to 20 additional pieces placed in the chimney, and that's going to be the start of your fire. You'll light those charcoals, get them white, and then dump them on top of the rest of the unlit coals. And throughout the day, the lit coals will burn down into the unlit coals, causing a consistent temp fire that lasts 8 to 10 hours. This is about 20 coals, and basically you want to start these without lighter fluid if possible. I use a propane torch to get them going. Some newspaper or special pellets to start charcoal placed underneath the chimney works as well. It's just that the propane torch is quite a bit quicker. You don't want to use lighter fluid because that can taint the taste of your food. But if you have to use lighter fluid, then you can get away with it on this small amount, and it shouldn't impact the flavor that much. You can use one of these devices built by Weber or somebody else to hold your coals off to one side of the grill, but ever since I bought mine, I've mainly used it on small fires that have to get tended every half hour. To do this 8-hour fire, I would have too many coals to fit in here, and it's easier just to pile them up. If you're using this method on a smaller grill, you'll have to adapt and build a smaller fire, which periodically you'll have to remove the lid and add more coals to the fire throughout the day. And it'll just be a trial by error method of, depending on grill size, you know, every half hour, every hour, or every 3 or 4 hours, pull off the lid and add more unlit coals to the fire. And then they'll burn as the fire needs to consume them to maintain the proper heat. This is my favorite way to light the charcoal when it's put in the charcoal chimney. I place this underneath the chimney while I hold it, and I don't have to use the lighter fluid or worry about any bad flavor, and it's a lot quicker than any of the other methods. You just have to have a wife that's crazy enough to let you buy one of these things. It's almost started. It's not ready yet, but that's kind of a low setting. Let's turn it up a bit. Basically, you want all your coals turned white and ash like this. I'm going to go turn off the torch and leave this sitting on the grill, and then we'll dump it into the fire to get the grill going. Right now, our grill has all the vents completely open. Our charcoal is going, and we just take the charcoal and dump it on top of the lit coals, spreading it out evenly over the pile. That starter chimney is really hot, so make sure when you set it down it's not on something that can catch fire or is close to anything that's going to melt or catch fire. Like I said before, you have all the vents open on your grill, both bottom and top, fully open, and you put the lid on and give this fire a chance to start some of the unlit coals and raise the temperature of the grill while you go inside and prepare the meat. Now that the grill is heating up outside, we're ready to prepare the meat. You want to keep the meat in the refrigerator until the last possible minute. Basically, when the temperature of the meat hits 140 degrees, the smoke ring is going to stop forming inside the meat no matter how much longer you smoke it. So the colder it starts out at, the longer it's going to take to hit that temperature of 140 degrees, and the deeper the smoke ring will reach inside the meat as it cooks. For your grill temp, you want it around 225 to 250 degrees, which is about the settings I showed you on the dampeners. First thing you want to do is unpackage the meat. I use a cookie sheet so I don't get blood all over the counter. And then you'll take it to the sink and rinse it off. It has a lot of brine and other stuff that they use for packaging. The ideal size of a pork roast would be 5 to 7 pounds with a cook time of 5 to 7 hours depending on weight and grill temperature. Once it's rinsed off, you'll put it into an aluminum foil pan such as this, and what that's going to do is catch the juices as it flows out of the meat and basically lets the meat sit in those juices and not completely dry out. It's especially important in areas where you don't have high humidity and the air is really dry, or during the winter time when you have dry air coupled with a lower air temperature and you need to keep your grill hotter to correctly cook the meat that you're cooking. And those two things together can really dry out barbecue. And you'll usually notice it if you go to barbecue restaurants during the winter time, their meat is drier than it would be at the same restaurant in the summer. The rub I'm using is just a KC Masterpiece barbecue seasoning. Make sure you don't get the steak seasoning, it doesn't taste as good. Really, you can use almost anything that you've used in the past or enjoy, or you can make your own. It could be as simple as kosher salt, light brown sugar, paprika, and some chili powder. About a tablespoon of the first two ingredients and about a teaspoon of the remaining two ingredients. Now, it's especially important to be careful when you're handling pork, because pork is able to carry a lot of the same diseases that humans can get sick from. And you don't want it to touch other meat such as beef, which you might be cooking rare. On mine, I like to make sure that the skin is completely removed before I get into cooking it. It's got a pretty tough, thick skin. You want to make sure to use a really good professional style knife that's been sharpened to remove the skin. If you're into using everything, you can take this skin and fry it up and make pork rinds or something. I'm not into that kind of thing, so I'll be disposing of it. And then once that's complete, you take the meat and rinse it off to make sure to get all that brine or whatever else was soaking in it while it was packaged. And then you put it into your pan. Okay, now I've rinsed the meat off, I've patted it dry. I'm going to basically add the rub, and you can use whatever you want as a rub, especially if you're into experimenting, or if this is your first time barbecuing something, which it might be because you're watching this video. I would stick with something that you know works. And you're just going to pat the seasoning into the meat, flip it over, and do the same thing. And this particular piece of pork weighs about 9 pounds. It does have a bone inside of it, so that adds a little bit extra weight. But I'm looking at maybe an 8-hour cook time at 250 degrees. Once the meat's prepared, it's time to move it outside to the grill and add the wood to the fire. Now we're ready to add the pork to the fire and also add the wood chips to get the smoke going. You're going to pull the lid off the grill and add the wood chips first, to give them a chance to start burning with the extra oxygen of the lid being off. And I have a half a bowl of wood chips. I'm going to add just a couple handfuls and come back and add the rest in a couple hours. And this will be dependent upon your experience with your grill and how it's set up. Now we add the pork butt to the grill. I leave mine uncovered because I want the smoke to get into the meat. If you want less of a smoky flavor but more moisture held in, you could cover in tin foil, but I really think it ruins the cooking process. And then from there, close up the top of the grill as I showed you. We're looking for that 225 to 250 degrees. And we're going to close the bottom of the grill as I showed in the beginning of the video. You'll notice that I put the top vent opposite of the fire, and basically what I want to do is draw that smoke across that meat before it escapes the grill. As you can see, there's quite a bit of smoke coming out of there. I had the lid cracked, it wasn't set on there properly and sealed. Now most of the smoke we're getting is coming out of this top vent. And every once in a while, since I don't have a thermometer built into this grill, I'll come out here and check the internal temperature with the thermometer. And for the meat, you're wanting to cook it until the internal temperature on the thickest part reaches 190 degrees. And you're going to check that with a meat thermometer. It's the best and safest way to handle this. If you're getting close to your cook time and it's not hit that temperature, since you're no longer really smoking the meat, you can open the grill up more to increase the heat a little, closer to maybe 375 or 275, and not getting it too hot, but cook the meat faster to hit that 190 degrees. Another thing to remember is when you pull the meat off, you'll cover it and let it sit, and during this time the temperature will raise about 5 to 10 degrees higher. So if you pull it off at
180
and cover it, you'll hit that
190
temperature. And that's all you have until the process is done. Other than if you're using a smaller grill, you'll have to come out and add more coal to your fire as the cook continues. Okay, it's been about 3 hours since we started cooking this, and I've taken off the lid and I'm going to let some air get to these coals. And at this point I'm going to add more of my wood chips in and check the temperature of the meat. The meat has hit about 128 degrees. Close it back up. I'm going to flip this piece of meat over so that this side that's been exposed to smoke has a chance to sit in the juices, and the other side that's been kind of laying in the juices will have a chance to get exposed to some of the smoke. The temperature seems a little bit low on the grill, so I'm going to open up the ports a little bit. It's only been 3 hours, but it just seems to be cooking a little bit slower than normal. And that's pretty much it for checking on it. As you could probably see, the coals in there had started to burn down, but we're nowhere close to using up all the coals, and this fire would last for quite a bit longer. If I had a temperature gauge installed on my grill, I would be able to be a little bit more precise on how I set the openings to get the temperature I want. Here, with this grill and without a thermometer, it's kind of a guess. I use a meat thermometer, but the meat thermometer is not really built for getting temperature readings inside the grill while it's going. Now that the internal temperatures hit about 185 to 190, I'm going to cover it with aluminum foil, and basically the piece will continue to cook and hit 190 throughout, and I'll do this for 30 minutes. Once that's done, we'll take it out, remove the foil, place this on a cutting board or some other surface, and then remove the meat from the bones and shred it. Now that the meat has rested, we're going to pull the meat off the bone and then shred it. Usually you can do this by hand, just ripping the meat off with your hands and then picking the meat apart and picking out any huge pieces of fat or cartilage that you find. Today I've bought a new product, and part of this is going to be a review for the first time of using it, that allows you to pick the meat up, shred it without touching it with your hands and getting burnt. These are the bear paws, and first thing I'm going to do is just use the two to kind of break apart some meat and get it over on a plate and shred it. And basically, you can see there I just stabbed a huge chunk, pulled it off. And you can use the one to stick and hold while the other one is used to rip. And you basically just continue in this method of removing meat from the bone until you remove all of the meat from the bone. Once you have some meat removed from the bone, you can sit here and start to shred it apart with the claws. Really, the cutting board I was using earlier for this would be better suited, but I was trying to avoid cleaning it by using a plate. Basically, I have the flats facing away from each other, and then I'm just pulling the meat apart. Any large chunks that contain a lot of fat like this and very little meat can get just tossed to your dog or thrown in the trash. Okay, now that the pulled pork is ready, we're going to make the sauce to cover it with. You don't have to use this sauce, but I like this Carolina style sauce that was pulled out of a Weber's cookbook, basically. And for that, you need to cook it over medium heat. And don't forget, I'm making enough to cover 9 pounds. If you're doing less than that, you just adjust the ingredients accordingly. The original sauce recipe is actually for 6 pounds, so I'm actually doing 1.5 times what the recipe calls for. In this case, we're going to need 1.5 cups of ketchup. I'll get the rest of this out of the measuring cup in a second. And then you're going to need 1.5 cups of apple cider vinegar. Basically, I'll use the apple cider vinegar to kind of flush out the remaining ketchup from the measuring cups. There's about half a cup of ketchup left in here that I couldn't get out. I'm just making sure that I clean out the bottle and get enough ketchup into this sauce. And then you need 3/8 of a cup of brown sugar. Basically a 1/4 cup, and then unless you have a 3/8 cup measuring cup, just estimate roughly half of that measuring cup to get your 3/8. And then you need 1½ teaspoons of Tabasco sauce. If you want it spicier, you can add more. If you want it a little bit milder, you just need to add less. And once all the ingredients are in your pan, just whisk it up and dissolve that sugar into your sauce. Now that the sauce and the pork are ready to be combined, all you do is pour the sauce over the pork and mix it all up, making sure all the meat's coated. Since there's so much pork, I'm going to put a little in a bowl, mix it, and then add a little bit more, and basically combine the sauce and the pork in layers and mix as I go, so I don't have a hard time mixing everything later. And if you wanted to add extra smoky flavor to your pulled pork, what you can do when you're making the sauce, take some of the drippings out of the pan and put that in part of your sauce. Now you're going to have to reduce probably your apple cider vinegar that you added, otherwise your sauce may end up too runny. But in the case of pulled pork, as you can tell, it's a very runny sauce, and it's meant to lightly coat everything. Now, because this bowl is pretty full, in order to avoid making this too complicated for myself, I'm just going to dump the rest of the sauce over the pork in this bowl, mix it up, and then just dump it in the bowl. And there you have it. That is your Carolina style pulled pork barbecue. Here you can see the nutritional value for 1 ounce of the Carolina pulled pork that I just made. Usually I'll take 8 ounces of this with me to work and eat it on a slice of bread or a roll. And for 8 ounces, the meat's going to cost you $1.04. You can't beat that for a good lunch. And as soon as you heat this stuff up in the microwave, the whole building's going to be jealous. Cook one of these on Saturday or Sunday, and then I'll take it in as lunch, however long it lasts, at ½ pound a day. Or if you're a little bit smaller, ½ pound of it a day. I hope you make this. Come back and watch the other videos I'm going to make. I'm going to do one on brisket, which will be really similar to this, other than how you prepare the cut of meat. I'm going to do one on a turkey for Thanksgiving, And I'll most definitely cover ribs, which is one of my favorite, but also probably one of the most expensive types of barbecue to make. That's it for the pulled pork barbecue. Let me know what you think about it, or if you have any questions, put them below and I'll try to answer them.